Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to take a second to thank all the voice actors in this video, as there were around 7 I believe, and to also thank everybody for the massive explosion in support as of recent, thanks to the Dark Somnium. It's kind of crazy to think about, and I haven't fully processed it in general, but yeah, big thank you to the Dark Somnium. And also a massive thank you to TJ Lee for basically helping me get to this point, as I definitely couldn't have done it without him whatsoever. But yeah, I want to say one more thing before the video starts. I don't mean to hold you guys up. Vennitas is already in this video, and I'm sure many of you already know what's happening between him and YouTube. I just want to quickly say that if you can, please try to help out Vennitas in any way, shape, or form. If you can, of course. If you can't, then support over on the Dusklight channel is heavily appreciated by him and TJ. Without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video. The following was recorded in the year 1346, the 23rd year of King Joffrey II's reign, during the final expansion of Predora's northwest territory. Footsteps, labored breath, twigs snapping underfoot, disorganized battle formations, shapes wrapped in black rags beneath the mask of twilight. With no moon to reveal their positions, they flanked the outskirts of the sleeping village. They moved disjointed, with no regard for who they might harm. They quickly fanned out through the fields beyond the first cottages. Fences laid broken ahead of them. Posts torn loose from the soil. Shapes loomed over the oppressive gloom. Too large to be men. Too still to be animals. The smell reached the unsuspecting citizens first. Rot like pus and disease. Putrid, wet, and old as the hills they came from. Somewhere in the town, something screamed. With weapons drawn, the foes unleashed all manner of chaos upon their lands. A war cry split open the perfect silence of the countryside. Reports of a brutal attack on the northwest countryside of the Predora Kingdom flooded from panicked whispers. No bodies were recovered from the scene. Officials from the King's Board called it a senseless attack perpetrated by mysterious assailants said to come from the lands of evil. The press was hesitant to elaborate on more specifics regarding the massacre. All the public knew was that nebulous forces planned a coordinated strike. The identities of the assailants were pretty much anybody's guess. The motive was subsequently inconclusive as well. Almost immediately, finger-pointing became a popular pastime for the troubled people of the lands. Many questions were being asked about the possibility of neighboring powers being behind it. Of course, they would deny involvement, but the fire that was spreading was quickly becoming inconsolable. Predora had just survived the greatest ever threat of its nation. Rumors were half of the conversation that wasn't left to small talk. The claims indicated that a pervasive smell of iron lingered even beyond the city lines, that the blood spilled had fertilized every farm, seeping across the acres into the soil. As a result, King Joffrey II ordered that citizens of Predora be forbidden from traveling to that place. After this, life would continue at its normal, butter-churning pace. It was just accented with occasional whispers. Over the coming months, the loudest questions would die down. Everyone slowly began to accept that answers would not be readily available. Concern lingered as shape just beyond the light, but the plebeians had faith that their government would keep them safe, at least for the time being. On a dreary evening with thick clouds boding rainfall, the High Council was summoned to the King's royal palace to discuss what was to be done about the situation of the besieged village. Their faces were all grim with responsibility and fear hanging over their heads. Chancellor Holt began the meeting with a dark, drawn-back expression on his face.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I have brought with me a proposal for added defenses on the sector that recently suffered the brutal attack from outside forces. This plan I've drafted is subject to change, which is why I brought this to the board for us to collectively sign off on my strategy.
After some courteous nods from the other councilmen, Holt pulled out a scroll containing the document.
Clearly, the threat cannot presently be reasoned with, so diplomatic options are not on the table for consideration. All possible foreign nations have verified that they had no connection to the attack. With that, I believe that our best course of action to ensure maximized economic efficiency and public safety is to send a squadron of the Predora military to the region so that we may open up the route for trade. Merchants will be allowed to travel around the perimeter of the village, while civilians are yet barred from access. This ensures that the crime scene is preserved, our territory is protected, and the economy remains afloat.
And the villagers?
Another voice interjected. The Chancellor did not look up from the scroll.
Civilian access will remain restricted at this time, Chairman.
The rogue voice, Councilman Edrin Hearth, shifted uncomfortably in his seat.
Will there be any aid to the survivors? Perhaps a team of builders to repair what was damaged on the night of the strike?
The request for aid is duly noted. If there are no more concerns with logistical challenges, does the board agree with the plan as I have presented it?
Without a second thought, the rest of the chairman replied enthusiastically with a strong aye. Hearth was the only one that abstained from the vote.
This meeting is officially adjourned. The cavalry will be sent out at first light. Progress reports will be sent shortly thereafter.
As the council left for the evening in their carriages, Hearth took one more look back to the palace, disdain filling his heart for the lack of empathy shown by his colleagues. But at the present moment, all that remained in his power was to watch the progress of the troops, frustrating as it may have been. The knights' armor glimmered in the early glow of a melting sunrise. Blades of grass swayed gently. The trees wrapped their branches against one another along the beaten path. The air was crisp with the scent of dew riding the breeze. Hooves trampled the earth as they moved forth. The hills silently watched with bated breath. They carried with them swords and shields to dissuade the lurking threat. At least they hoped to. The king oversaw their departure from his terrace, with a bejeweled chalice in his hand. He contemplated what his course of action would be in the event that something went awry. There would be plenty of reinforcements, not a single measure spared. Operations like these were always more intense when he knew something the public didn't.
Sire?
A voice called to him, snapping him from his trance. It was a servant from the royal kitchen.
I do apologize for not announcing my presence sooner. I did not mean to frighten you. What would you prefer for tonight's feast in the dining hall?
No worries, I'm fine.
He replied, uncertainty still lingering in his voice.
Prepare for our guests a roasted boar. Bring us assorted fruits and vegetables and make some use of those imported spices. We will need to make an impression.
Yes, my liege. I shall relay your orders to the team of chefs.
As the man walked back to the lower chambers of the castle, King Joffrey let his gaze rest on the horizon of the lands he conquered. It was not out of pride that he stared. Quietly eating at the edges of his composure was fear. The disquiet that meant something challenged his dominance. The possibility that for once in his life, something stood to be insurmountable to him. No, that would have given away his dread. The only way to move forward was to slow down and take a breath. All would straighten out if he acted as the voice of reason. Everything hinged upon the success of the protection along the border. Almost as soon as the troop reached its destination, swords were drawn. The atmosphere was potent with a foreboding silence. First came the scent of death, sweet in the worst possible definition, bitter like rot as the stench of iron made its home in their nostrils. The soil beneath their feet was almost tinted in the dried crimson from all the bloodshed. The architecture was but a reminder of what used to stand in that place. The land did not protest. Homes were obliterated. Even the local church was brought to little more than its foundation. Defensive barriers were set up around the town while the few remaining souls watched from within what was left of their houses, left with nowhere else to go, nothing to hold on to, barely the clothes on their aching backs. This destruction, this barbaricism, it stunned the hearts and minds of the cavalry who took several moments to regain their composure. Morale was already low. Tensions seemed to peak when the extent of such brutality was unveiled. Nevertheless, there was a job to be done, an order to be fulfilled. Protect what remained. The first progress report came from a messenger in the group whose express purpose was to relay information back and forth. For the rest of the kingdom, this meant a breath of relief. If nothing else, it was a sign that peace going forward could be maintained. According to the messenger's report, all was going well. Even if the knights were unsettled by the things they had seen, a boundary was established, hopefully deterring any more bloodshed in the event of another attack. Many on the board were satisfied with Chancellor Holt's plan. Trade continued in the region because of the safety net of nearby enforcers. Edrin, however, was left unsettled. It wasn't that he didn't believe in the efficiency of his strategy. Everyone saw how the merchants could freely travel around that area of the countryside. But he believed that in the Crown's desire for economic viability, the common man was left to fend for himself. The interests of the government were placed above that of the people it answered to. Hearth thought back to the proposal at the meeting, how his concerns for the citizens were completely brushed aside only to make room for a cold bureaucracy. Even if Holt's proposal worked and Perdora never suffered again, he would never forget how the men who sat in their thrones abandoned the well-being of the ones who mattered most. The air whispered beyond the busy streets of the capital city. Hearth gazed from within his study at the impregnable cover of dusk, trying to connect the dots that he knew should never be questioned. If Perdora was truly being targeted in a covert operation and its people were being made martyrs, why did no one at least care about the survivors? They should have been top priority along with security. Something was not adding up logically. The situation had quieted down overall. The conspiracy theorists and so-called free thinkers had piped down for the time being, giving the illusion that peace had been maintained. The people of the region would not be prepared for just how incorrect that notion was. The kingdom was beginning to enter an ominous phase of unrest. The messenger's reports took on a wholly unusual cadence that, for the most part, went unnoticed by the board of officials until it was far too late. It began with a repeated phrase in each progress report, barely traceable, but present nonetheless. Nothing remains. The first red flag should have been that the claim was immediately inaccurate. To some extent, there was a shell of the village left, and from what they already knew of the incident, there were definitely survivors. Truth be told, everyone had already been so exhausted from stress that they may have just glossed over it. But somebody was lying. Hearth knew while everyone took their time to relax, something else entirely was taking place. Nobody could have been certain that his deception was deliberate, but Edrin could not leave that stone unturned. He had to know what was really going on. Officials began scratching their heads when the messages began to lose their coherence. It devolved from clinical precision to fearful prattling, lingering on the edge of speculation. One such report read,
Day 46. There have been no sightings of enemy forces near the border. Knights patrol the defensive lines on shifts to ensure constant security, but I can't help but feel that we are not alone. The silence that surrounds this place is terror in its truest form. Merchants pass by during the day while we keep an eye on the wilderness beyond at night. It is strange, however. Paths into the tree line have grown over at an exceeding rate. I see vines and shrubbery where before there were trails that tucked into the lush forest. The reports from before indicated that the blood may have fed the soil well, so much that it took on a crimson hue, but I don't see how this is possible. I just don't have an answer for this. Perhaps there will be more to glean upon a more careful inspection, but for now, there has been no breach. The point is still secure.
Of course, the board categorized it as a manifestation of paranoia. Under pressure, one is plagued with the most unpleasant thoughts. It's more or less expected. Fearing that something else was afoot, Edrin arranged a private meeting with Chancellor Holt and King Joffrey himself to air out his problems, to plead his case where it was most important. They met in the king's chambers. This time, it was Hearth that began the meeting.
Your Highness, Chancellor,
He began, gesturing at them.
I have brought us together because I am worried for our citizens in the Northwestern Territory. The decisive action to ramp up defense along the border has served us well, but there are important factors that I believe are being overlooked. When we opened up the route for trade, it seemed to me that there weren't enough questions being asked on the behalf of the survivors of the attack. As I am reviewing the initial event along with the letter sent back to the castle, I am troubled by inconsistencies in certain details.
I think you'd find instead that our measures have brought nothing but peace for our kingdom.
Holt interjected.
It is the case that we suffered a tragedy. It is also the case that if the world shuts down over one attack, we would never get anything done. Do not be daft in the assumption that I do not care for our citizens. The issue has been under control.
Do you even know where the attack came from? Do you seriously know for sure that something like this will never happen again? As a matter of fact, I'm asking rhetorically right now, because I already know that you are clueless. You couldn't tell me if it was a band of rogue pirates or a troop from a foreign nation. Diplomats asked around, but do you really think that they're going to declare that they were the perpetrators? This whole process has been riddled with small holes.
Gentlemen,
Both of them turned to King Joffrey.
On this issue, we must not fight. I understand your frustrations, Councilman. I also admire the Chancellor's dedication to efficiency. It is my duty as the monarch to look after each of my citizens. I don't rest until my people can, with this I am certain. The survivors are safe, and their concerns are being met with aid.
A dark look briefly flickered in Edrin's expression.
Then why is it so difficult to learn anything about them? Why are they a footnote at our bureaucratic meetings? Why does the messenger only speak of foul omens and utterly fail to report the condition of the Northwest citizens?
You dare question the integrity of...
King Joffrey raised a hand to silence Holt.
There is only so much information I can give to the public. But I want you to sleep easily tonight because even without revealing what I am forbidden to say, it doesn't change. They are safe.
Why is this knowledge not privy to us? If the people do not deserve to know, what could you possibly know that even we shouldn't? Don't you think your advisors would prefer to be clued in on crucial details?
Holt gaped upon the sight of his attitude to the king. Joffrey did not show any sign of anger in his expression. His demeanor instead gave off a blank stare devoid of any real emotion. That worried them even more.
This matter is resolved. Continue with your duties. It is what's best. I don't think you should concern yourself with this any longer. Go home to your families and be grateful. You'll never know how much you have left of your lifespan to appreciate the ones you love. Good night, gentlemen.
With that, the meeting adjourned. Edrin walked back, staring at the ground as he went. Every aspect of the interaction breathed on him wrong, especially not with the shell of his face. A direct contrast to the vibrant smiles he flashed in the face of his loyal subjects. What he saw was a soul-drained man, not a king, a God-fearing man. And if something made him detached that far from his usual self, how horrible could that hidden truth have been? What worldly evils could he possibly have glimpsed? Edrin was, of course, a man of empiricism. He was meant to stay grounded in some form of inalienable truth, but a chill ran up and down his back as he weighed the case in his mind. No adversary had ever brought the king to such silent dread. No fleshen enemy could stand against the resolve of an absolute monarch. Any mortal threat should crumble beneath the force. By no means was Joffrey a quiet man behind closed doors. Never in service of his country had he ever witnessed a king try to hide so much unrest in his soul. It was impossible to accept any other answer than the preposterous notion that somehow this was a threat from the world of mysticism. All forms of magic had been banned in Perdora for nearly 100 years, but was it the fear of all the harm it could wreak or the fear of never understanding its implications? If it could never be used without consequence, it could never belong in the nation of rising hearts. At least that was what everyone else said. Though Edrin was still on the fence of believing in the ephemeral, that horrible notion would not stop bothering him that whatever victimized those citizens, no sword could pierce it. The wariness sprouted wings and took a new shape in his chest. Somehow, he knew those nights would not return. The reports would come in less frequently until the bastion went silent. He prayed that he was wrong, that it was nothing more than concern for the future. But he needed to act quickly, even if it meant breaking the law. He had to know what really happened to those people. Edrin visited the Royal Chamber of Records meant for keeping track of criminals. He was certain he'd heard of a case perhaps 5 years prior about a man who was cast into exile for his practice of witchcraft. He couldn't quite remember his name, for it had been so long. That was gonna take a while. So many reports, too many unrelated leads. Just as he thought that it might have been a waste of time, he found it. Valkrin Bale, accused of promoting black magic in defiance of the one true God. Witnesses described an odd aura surrounding him, a rippling power emanating from his presence that frightened him. Sentenced to exile with no chance of return. Well, at least this one wasn't executed. There was still some hope after all. The reports from his arrest didn't elaborate on anything crucial, and it was a disturbing pattern that Edrin began to recognize. Were the transcribers just that lazy? Or did the government genuinely offer no sympathy? On the list of relatives, there was only one name to be found. Edith Bale. It was also failed to specify her relation to him. For all he knew, she could be anything on the spectrum between his study partner and his wife. Well, if evil wizards had wives, He'd have to ask around for breadcrumbs on her whereabouts. She held perhaps Edrin's only real hope of finding Valkrin out in the wilderness beyond their lands. Venturing alone outside the capital city, Edrin made his way to smaller villages along the western lines. He desperately tried to blend in with the common folk. He clothed himself in the tunic of a working-class man so as to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention to himself. Most people didn't want to talk about an outlaw. Talk of magic was taboo. Men would get an unreadable scrunch in their expression while the women would try their best to become invisible. They'd look around as if to pretend like they weren't talking to him. As he walked away from what might have been the 15th rejection, his moral compass tossed and turned with his disguise moving in lockstep. Was what he was doing really a bad thing just because it was against the law? What was the helm of his morality? A narrative of society or the will of an individual? He found himself once more leveling his gaze at the dirt at his feet as he continued, beginning to wonder if this was a pointless venture. Just then, he and a woman had suddenly bumped into each other. She wasn't very observant of her surroundings either. The force and sudden surprise caused her to fall on the ground, prompting Edrin to profusely apologize. Reaching out a hand, he gestured to help her up. She was perhaps in her mid-20s with olive skin and eyes of a smooth amber. Dark, waving hair fell with such grace upon her shoulders.
I'm terribly sorry,
Edrin said, brushing the dirt from her sleeves.
You're all right. I'm sorry for not looking where I'm going.
Guess we have similar problems.
He laughed.
Be safe. Have a good day.
But as she walked away, something clicked in his head. He turned to her as she was walking away. No, it was definitely her. When the talk of the town revolved around Valkrin's case, there was a gossip of the possibility of a twin. He thought back to every time in the previous years he'd laughed it off whenever someone tried to prove the existence of his supposed sister. They called them crazy and took them for grains of salt. But they described her almost exactly as he was seeing her. Valkrin was a scraggly thing, unkempt and unshaven. Edith was the embodiment of worldly beauty, clean complexion with the most beautiful skin the kingdom could ever know.
Hey, wait!
He called out to her. She hadn't heard him. He picked up his pace and got closer, calling for her once again. She definitely heard it that time, but she pretended her best not to. She kept moving with her head tilted down. It was because she was trying to avoid the attention too. She knew that he was onto her scent. Edrin didn't have such time to play games. He damn near ran up to her and put out a hand on her shoulder to get her to stop. Instantly, she spun around with a look of cold defiance on her face.
What do you want, Councilman Hearth?
Shit.
He thought. The cover immediately was blown.
How do you know?
Where do you get off stalking me 5 years after you persecute my brother?
It wasn't me that punished him. It was...
Why do you not care for the subjects of this kingdom? My brother did nothing wrong, and you fools cast him aside and called him a criminal. Have you no...
Listen to me, goddammit. I had nothing to do with Valkrin's exile. I need to find him before it's too late. I believe that Perdora is in peril. Right now, I am acting on my own accord. This is not a mission of the crown. I care deeply for my citizens. You will hold your tongue when questioning the respect I have for this nation's people. Where is your brother gone?
I could tell you, but you must not report it to the knights.
Your truth is safe behind my lips.
He lives in secrecy in my cellar. We were somehow able to smuggle him back in even after he was banished.
Edrin nodded with a brief moment of unbroken eye contact. Edith nodded as well, and they walked back to her home together. The Bale residence was unassuming upon a cursory glance. It was a house that fit the profile of almost every other weather-damaged shelter in the area. Everything even appeared normal within, but it was the atmosphere that felt heavy. Perhaps it was the stress of the situation weighing down on him, but that house did not feel like a home. Just as he was about to ask Edith to lead the way, a gruff voice caught him off guard.
I spent a long time wondering,
Valkrin stood in a gloomy corner, peering out at them.
How could a good-hearted man be cast aside by the people he so loved?
Valkrin, my name is...
I know damn well who you are. An advisor to the king. You people sit in that old ivory tower and cast your judgment on other good-hearted men, not dissimilar to myself. I was once a practitioner of medicine in the capital city. I could have been a beacon of hope and good health to my people. You stand there and look upon me in this state with nothing more than a memory to my name. What is it that you want with me, Edrin?
Nothing excuses what was done to you, Mr. Bale. It's as you say. I informed the king's policies, but I played no part in your banishment. I fear that my colleagues hide a secret so grave that it threatens this nation's very foundation. They sent a squadron of knights to defend the village, but I have the worst feeling that they won't prevent anything. I know there's a part of you that still cares for the citizens of Perdora. I sought for you because all other explanations have been ruled out in my mind. Whatever it is out there is not a troop of soldiers that wish to bring slavery and death. It is wrath in itself. It is judgment for something. I can't be sure. I can't articulate what else it could possibly be, but every other logical approach I take fails. I need your help because no one else will come this far.
A heavy moment of silence sat between the two of them as Valkrin gazed directly into his soul.
And why would I want to save the nation that has forsaken me?
Because you are a principled man, and you know deep down that it wasn't the people of Perdora that abandoned you. It was its doctrine. There has to be some shred of you that sees the good in the common folk you treated. Come with me to find out what's really happening so that innocent civilians won't be harmed by what's coming.
The carriage ride was bumpy, uncomfortable, silent. Silence, Valkrin decided, was worse than the jolting. He complained about having to duck in the body of the carriage when they happened to pass merchants. Edith watched with worry carved in her expression as they set off on their mission. Edrin assured him that it was the only way to minimize the risk of being caught. The entire endeavor was a Hail Mary to begin with. They had to be extremely careful if they didn't want anyone to know about what they were investigating. The plan was simple. Approach the outskirts of the town at dusk so as to be camouflaged by the cover of twilight. The military would very likely be on their patrol, but sneaking under the total darkness would drastically reduce the odds of being caught. The hope was that they could determine once and for all by staking out the scene what the enemy really was. In a twisted way, Edrin prayed he was wrong. He silently pleaded for the soldiers to be there when they arrived, at least for the sake of the survivors. Stars glimmered like infinite gems under a canopy as they left the carriage in the thick forest beyond the tree line. They ducked low, constantly scanning for barely visible silhouettes ahead. Perhaps torches being carried around. They found neither. It made Edrin's heart falter, pitifully sinking like a gulf of dread. Pitch black. No horses or men to be found. Along with that was a pure, unyielding quiet that bared its fangs at them. The insects dare not make a sound. Valkrin felt something deeply wrong in the absence of anything. First and foremost was the primal urge to tuck tail and run, but underlying that was the sensation of a disturbance, the uncanny feeling that something wasn't right. It could have been almost natural, but one oddity fractured the whole image. His knowledge of the arcane extended far, but it could not penetrate the aura he was getting from that place. Quietly approaching the village, realization flashed in Edrin's brain upon seeing the buildings. They were entirely intact, nothing demolished, no debris of what was supposedly left behind. His eyes widened with bated breath as he realized something else. Everything in the reports had been a dramatization. The messages detailed a pervasive stench of rot and iron, one that would make eyes water at the very proximity. Could it be that they were fabricated? Founded on lies?
I don't like this one bit. What exactly do we hope to achieve here, Edrin?
I needed to know. I had to. I'm not so sure anymore, though. We need to immediately find the survivors. I have a bad feeling about what the government has hidden. This silence can never be good.
Edrin started speedwalking towards the nearby homes to desperately dissuade the rising terror in his stomach. Valkrin quickened his pace to keep up. In Edrin's haste, he tripped over a hard object sticking directly out of the ground. Cursing, he pulled himself together only to stop and stare into the darkness at his feet and kneel to inspect the protrusion. It was a hand of stone, like a buried statue reaching up from a shallow grave. A look of disturbed confusion washed over their faces even in the dark. They glanced ahead to where they were just running to and froze where they stood. A motionless figure standing at an odd angle, as if frozen in time midway through bending over to pick something up.
Hello? Are you okay? What's happening here? Can you hear me?
It elicited no response. The person was perhaps more still than an undisturbed lake. Valkrin took a few steps forward before he gasped and began to shake as if mortified by something that suddenly clicked. It was another statue. It eerily faced them in the obscurity of the walkways between the houses. More stood in gardens and laid with blank faces in their beds. Every home was occupied merely by the outlines of sculpted people.
I know of this curse.
Valkrin said shakily as Edrin's frown deepened with unease.
Please don't tell me that I'm right. Please, God, I don't want to be right.
I'd only ever read about something like this. I never would have thought it to be real. It's impossible. Edrin, I think this may actually be the hand of God. What are we supposed to do to protect the kingdom? What can we do?
There has to be a way. I refuse to believe that this is what we're destined for. The fact we aren't just turning just by being here has to mean that there's a way to fix all of it.
I have no way of knowing how to combat it. I took it to be a myth for years. There's nothing that prepares you for something like this.
Can't you apply your knowledge to it? To see if at least the logic tracks?
I don't think you quite see what I'm seeing. Everything I've learned is but a blink in its eye. I can't map my logic onto something that vastly supersedes me.
Salutations, travelers.
Both of them just about jumped out of their skin. A form within a translucent veil had appeared before them. Edrin fell backwards, slack-jawed at its presence. Valkrin took a step back, not being able to even think of actions to take. It glowed a faint white, draped in tattered rags without so much of a structure that it resembled madness itself. There were small orbs of light that indicated where its head probably was, but it was otherwise a figment composed of fog and waste. It spoke with two tongues, alternating between voices of reason.
May we engage in discourse?
The first voice asked.
What was it that you wanted from these people?
Edrin demanded.
What did they do to deserve this?
This used to be a place of worship, you know.
It cast its gaze out to the hillside.
Long before the kingdom of man's materialism claimed the wilderness by force, there lived a people that respected the lands. They built temples to bring themselves closer to absolution with nature. The pious ones murdered the tribes and destroyed those temples. Man's hunger for power makes them numb to all else.
Why the children then? What were they guilty of?
My judgment is without conscience. I am merely the will of nature. This persecution is void of any hatred. I am not without compassion, but I have no control of these injustices.
Valkrin didn't reply at first. He stared at the statues, at the quiet preserved in their faces.
It isn't choosing them, and it isn't sparing ours.
Edrin turned sharply at him.
Valkrin!
No. Listen to it. It's not an evil that we can rectify. It's a corrective force.
You would let this continue, while everyone else in power lies about it.
Valkrin finally met his gaze again. There was no anger in his eyes, only certainty.
I would not presume I have the right to stop it.
Is there some way the rest of my nation could be spared? They need not suffer. Not every man ravages the plane he walks. Not every man antagonizes the environment. Surely there are those you could consciously spare.
Edrin, you're the smartest person I've met in a long time. You were able to find me and figure out that there's something deeply wrong with the official narrative, but surely you don't believe that you can somehow alter the course of fate.
Fate? This is the fate of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong? How can you accept this?
Because it was my fate to be exiled, regardless of whether or not people thought the practice of magic was good or bad. These things are meant to occur. The ones that deem it so only do it because that's the way it ought to be.
The spirit gazed absently at them.
I understand it may be difficult to accept. Your government has lied to you, and your people left you behind in the wake of hysteria, but I want you to know that this is not malevolent. What I'm about to do has no root in ideology or retribution. This is not a curse, but you have no hope of stopping this. I'm sorry for everything.
Take it all. Reclaim the kingdom. Leave nothing left of civilization.
Edrin balled his hands into fists.
I'm not giving up on the good of my people. Have you no love left in your heart? How could you be so fucking cruel?
It takes a heart to do this. I don't expect you to be able to justify this in your worldview, but please don't try to stand in my way.
I hate to agree, but I think it's right. We must leave this place and never return.
I'm not leaving it all behind.
That is your grave to dig. I will not be the one to bury you, but know this. I tried to tell you.
I will die here before I knowingly let them fade away.
I'll be seeing you, Edrin. I must go. My impermanence has no place in these lands.
With one pitiful glance back, he made his way to the mountains further north, away from the village, away from everything. From within his robe, he pulled a leather-bound journal and began to write a final message, even with the hope that no one would ever read it.
My impermanence has no place in these lands. I understand it clearly now. It wasn't the hand of God that we saw on this day. Nature's will is not his wrath. It is the will and the way of all things. I know tomorrow that Pradora will not stand as a kingdom ruling over this place. Come first light, there will be nothing left of man, only an empire of moss and stone.
Dawn approached once more. Light spilled across every meadow, peered above every mountaintop. It illuminated the kingdom of Pradora and left behind a jungle of ruins. Every street was overrun with vine and shrubbery. Each home was reclaimed by thick vegetation. The castle lay as a shell of what it used to be. Pillars, reduced to fragmented boulders of chipped stones. The crown was left as little more than a ring of thorns of whatever used to be gold. And there he sat, the king, facing the northwest, slumped backwards in his throne, calcified into the silhouette of a man. And before him was what remained, a nation of statues, a world of corpses.